So, welcome back. It's another short section from The Poison Hill, part one. That kind of looks at David and Gertrude's relationship. He's come up to visit her for the weekend in St. Paul. He's working in Chicago for the summer. They walked back up the hill to the car in pairs, Mrs. Lesko and Mrs. Roy slightly behind David and Gertrude. Gertrude thought that she would have quarreled with David, really quarreled with him had he let her. Everything seemed gnarled and tangled, all because she had something important to say and did not know how to do it. Streetlights had come on. Bats tumbled around them like bits of black cloth. The far end of the lake, shining pink and silver, still reflected the sunset. Above it were long white clouds floating in straight lines like bars across the sky. "Look at that," her mother said, catching Mrs. Roy's arm and stopping her. "Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Gertrude, isn't that gorgeous? Gorgeous." Gertrude could feel the cold, muddy ground through her thin shoes. "No," she said, "I hate sunsets." It was true. It was a feeling left over from those winter days in bed during her illnesses, watching the sky fade, waiting for the clock to tick through the dusk and bring on dinner. A feeling that something was being not just lost, but criminally wasted, criminally destroyed, that she was a coward. "Oh, that's silly. Who hates sunsets?" She saw David opening the car door for her, smile. "I do." The sky was fading as they drove home. Spots from the streetlights slid over David's hands. There were still children out slipping like black cats through the streets in the poorer neighborhoods. "But Carrie, an operation. Are you sure?" Mrs. Roy murmured from the back seat. It had taken her mother less than half an hour to tell David's mother the whole story of Gertrude's problem. Up to her, of course, but Dr. Kirby is very highly thought of, an expert in his field. Her mother's tongue would unravel it to every female who would possibly be told. It would be wound in and out of daily life so it could be brought up 100 different ways. "Gertrude, you really ought to read this. Sally Ann told me. It's so highly thought of. Not fair to David, really." That final ominous sentence, plucked from all the things she had said in Dr. Kirby's office, to be played again and again, the highest, most important card. Not fair to David, really. He'll want to have children someday. A pain began in her stomach. She looked over at David, at his fingers tapping against the steering wheel. She never wanted him to touch her. She couldn't breathe. The world went white, and there was a sensation like someone slicing through her brain. She would never marry David. She didn't want him to touch her. The car bumped, going over something, and she opened her eyes. They were passing an all-night drugstore, lit up yellow against the dusk. A man pushed out of the door, holding a brown paper bag. For a moment, the man did not seem real, any more than she did. Or maybe she was the man and he was her, but the world, bending out of shape, bent back. She drew a breath. She was in the car. She had been thinking something about David, but she wouldn't think about that right now. She would just wait a few minutes, and when she came back to it, everything would be fine. Her mother leaned forward and touched her shoulder. She jumped. "Gertrude, what do you think?" "I wasn't listening." "Bonnie's been telling us about a health resort her sister Ellen went to in Montana near Glacier Park. You know, people are always going to Glacier for the air." "You can breathe and drink the water like Saratoga," Mrs. Roy said. "It has radium in it, and that's good for all kinds of internal problems." "It is rather far, all the way out to Montana," her mother murmured. "Oh, the Great Northern practically goes to the doorstep. I have the brochure somewhere. David, remind me to look for it tonight before we go up." David laughed. "You know, Ma, you two talk about Gertrude like she wasn't even there. You didn't even ask Gertrude if she wanted to go to this Montana place." Silence, and then both mothers protested loudly. "Oh, David, I just thought." They were on Grand now. The movie theater flashed by. "Well," Mrs. Roy said, "I was just going to say that, according to Ellen, a lot of millionaires go there." "Millionaires?" David heard a slight laugh. Gertrude heard a slight laugh in David's voice. "Yes, you know, businessmen from back east, when they have their nervous breakdowns." "I see," David said. He looked over at Gertrude, smiling, expecting she would see the joke neither of their mothers got. And she felt a warmth in the chest at how well they matched each other, how he had always made her laugh, how they understood each other. What she had felt had been a moment of panic, of looking down from the high wire, nothing more. They had years behind them of letters and conversations and friendship. You could not compare year on year of sharing such things with a single moment of panic. They would be alone together tomorrow at any rate, and David, the same serious David she had seen most of the day, would know what to do.